As a little child, I used to have troubles with nightmares, with sleep, always waking, falling and falling and falling. But as I grew, I matured, and I was able to overcome my fear of heights. Hello, I'm Mark Ridgway. This lecture is a polite but assertive pushback on 21st century science. We've come a long way, and yet at the beginning of the 21st century, we see science promulgating fear and nightmares with which the general public are really struggling. Perhaps scientists need to learn how to overcome this and communicate more clearly. Really, I'm wanting to talk about life. Life's made up of those three things: working, eating, sleeping. Of course, there's more to life than that, but they're the three elements that make up life. Take those away and everything stops. And particularly, I want to focus on sleeping today, because lack of sleep is very much related to uncertainty. The Bible talks about the rich man who has so much riches that he has so much uncertainty that he can't sleep. The labourer is quite content. He knows what's coming, and he can rest easy. So if we want to sleep well at night, then we need to talk about the subject of uncertainty. I'll say this: you can never master uncertainty, but you can manage your response to it. I'm going to share some of my 40 years of experiences in information technology, and I'm going to give you 5 principles that I have learned over the years. But first I want to bring you into my world. I want to tell the story of Andy and the missing full stop. Andy's a wonderful young family man, 2 kids, lovely wife, and here's a picture of him. Last day of work before he leaves, and he's got one last task to do. He saved the easiest to last, a 1-line code change. And he's actually just made it. He's putting all the evidence together to pass on to the next team, showing that he's completed the task and tested it. And it's going to go into the bigger testing teams for approval. And then he's off and away. However, what hasn't been noticed by Andy or any of the testing teams is that he's leant on the keyboard and removed a full stop somewhere else in the code. Now, normally this is fatal, but not this time. It has the most unanticipated impact because the program executes normally, except about once every 1,000 times. And then it goes bananas and starts deleting records in the database quite randomly. It's impossible to tell. So 3 days after going live, and reports of missing records everywhere, the program is halted, everything stops, and of course the missing full stop is located. You can't go forward, you can't go backwards. It's pretty much catastrophe with capital letters in every letter. It's a very sad story, and I'll finish there. We have a name for this. It's called Weinberg's Law, and it goes like this. If builders built buildings the way programmers built programs, then the first woodpecker that came along would destroy civilization. So, 5 principles to handle uncertainty. Principle number 1. Confidence trumps fear. I spend a lot of time in my work career in the testing space. Now, a lot of people think they know what I do. I go and test programs and I create lists of bugs and help get them fixed. That's actually not at the heart of what I do. That's not a testing role, because testing is all about selling confidence. This is how it works. You have a business customer who has made a change to his system, a significant change, and he is very nervous. Nervous not so much about his change failing, because he's got control of his world. If it fails, then his people will fix it. He is afraid that he will bring the world down like a woodpecker. So he comes to us, and we develop a package of tests and of strategies which is aimed at allowing him to sleep at night. We bring it to him and we say, will you sleep well at night if we can prove all of this? Yes, I suppose so, maybe a bit more. Yeah, and it goes round and round in circles until we get to a point where we can get an executable strategy to enable him to feel confident. This is not a confidence that's fake. This is not just without evidence. There's plenty of evidence, and there's databases full of evidence. But the heart, the very point we're aiming at, is to give him confidence that he can go out and execute and run his system without impacting anyone else. But let's look at science practice today. And it's a mixed bag. I think of the Children's Cancer Institute in Sydney. It's a private medical research program for children's cancer, of course. It's a wonderful program, and it serves its customers, families with children who have cancer. They're developing strategies and routines and regimes that are really targeted at building confidence in families that they can survive, that their children will be given the best care that's possible at this point in time. That's really important. At the same time, if you look at, say, the mainstream media, then science is the breeding ground for an endless stream of fear and nightmares. The logic seems to be that the worse you make it, the more attention you get. It's my life experience that building confidence in people is our call. That using fear is very, very dangerous and is often a path to destruction. My point number 2, resilience trumps precaution. Back in history, the greatest of all virtues was prudence. It's a word we don't use much anymore and has negative connotation. But its original meaning is very clear. It's that gift to make decisions, to have that foresight, to wisely balance out risks and opportunities, using an open-minded understanding of basic truths. And it works because you used basic truths and open-minded understandings, things which are more certain, rather than digging down into the detail where it is uncertain. But we've abandoned that, certainly over the last 20 or so years, in favour of precautionary thinking. And that's very easy to understand. If you see a problem, you of course fix it. Isn't that wisdom? Well, actually, no. And that's very simple to understand as well, because when you fix one problem, you create another. Or look at it another way, when you fix a problem, you take resources from somewhere else and obviously create a problem in that space. Let me give you some lessons from my IT world that will help explain. My company I was working for, hit CEO, met with the CEO of another company and did a big deal. And he came back and said, I've done this great deal. We're going to have our computer systems ready by this date. And we just our jaws dropped and said, well, that's not really possible. And after doing some analysis, we concluded that, to move ahead at that pace would be catastrophic. We would have to take precautionary action and back out and just move the date back. There was no option. But our management settled us down and said, look, what you're going to do is you're going to be resilient. You're going to make this change. And we're going to back you up. And you're going to see it through to the end. And there's going to be problems. But you're going to see it through. Because you've been resilient before. Show the guts that you've shown before. And we did. We went out there. There was a stack of problems. But the deal was done. Everyone was happy. Okay, yes, there was a long list of problems and it cost a lot of money to fix. But the deal was worth an enormous amount to our company. It was fantastic. Resilience. Here's a story which isn't so happy. There was a young systems architect and he'd been given a wonderful opportunity to address the executive. And he decided that he was going to, spend a whole week preparing, and he decided he was focusing very much on how it was going to be presented. And he was going to use a new technology at the time. It was going to be a screen projector, which was connected to a laptop with PowerPoint. Now, that was very new at that stage. And people came in and said, be careful. You need to take precautions because this thing doesn't always work. It was like that in those early days. So he thought and said, well, I'll create a set of projector slides. And so he went ahead and created the set of projector slides. And then he thought a few days later, I've got a day or two left. Actually, the projector slides may not be enough. I'll create some overhead foils as well, which is what he did. He created those. And he went in very confident to his meeting, knowing that he'd covered everything. So he went to connect the projector up. The audience had arrived. All the executive were there. And of course the computer wouldn't connect to the projector. We told him so. No worries. He went on to his slides, stuck the slides in the projector, but the projector just didn't want to focus. You couldn't read it. It was ugly. Wow. At least the overhead projectors, they rarely fail. Bing! Yes, the bulb went. Well, at least there's a spare bulb in the thing. Well, I won't continue the story. You know what happens. He went home and resigned. And it's a very, very sad story because all he needed to do was be resilient. Stand up, take a whiteboard marker, go to the whiteboard behind him and start drawing. Now, science today is weighing into a lot of problems and advocating precautionary actions on a whole range of things. And it's a game that's played. They come in one year and say, look, we need to do something or other. But of course, no one listens. So the following year they come in and obviously the problem's worse. And then the following year it's even worse again. In fact, it's the end of civilization. What's happening? And why aren't the governments listening? Well, that's pretty simple too. The government is not going to give the steering wheel to scientists. Yeah, they know, they'll trust scientists to a certain degree. I mean, that's okay, but they're not going to give the steering wheel to the scientists to swerve and miss a particular obstacle, then send the car into a spin and off over a cliff edge. They're not going to do that. Let's talk theology. Adam and Eve were called to be order bringers. That's a term that John Walton uses. I borrow that from him. Bringing order out of chaos is more than just precautionary thinking. Yes, it involves solving problems, but it's a lot more. It's about using those gifts that God has given us, those gifts that actually are part of God's essence themselves. We're made in God's image, and those things such as intent and vision and creativity, resilience, and love. Those things don't exist in the precautionary world. The precautionary outlook actually crushes those things. Nir Eyal wrote this: "The most dangerous form of distraction is the kind that tricks us into prioritising the urgent at the expense of the important." I think we should listen very carefully. Point 3. Testing trumps evidence. Let me say this. Evidence is cheap. In the business world and in the real world, it's accountability that is the counting thing. A professor of physics, a friend of mine, once told me that when scientists create fear with their predictions or their scenarios, we need to find ways of making them accountable for their statements. There's a lot of wisdom in that. It's a principle that's laid down in the Old Testament for prophets. With science, there is this soft underbelly. It's trying to speak into society, but it's this lack of accountability that's hurting them. We already have the reproducibility problem. And producing streams of evidence may convince a lot of people. But the truth is not such an easy road where there's uncertainty. There's going to be another group who's going to come along with a different set of evidence, counter evidence, and of course you end up with a fight and kids in a playground. I had a friend at work, I called him Mr. S. He was a major release manager. He would bring a whole set of teams together, and the whole goal was, of course, the final end-to-end test. This would be the test done just prior to making a major software change. And there would invariably be one party who would say, well, we've run out of budget and we don't have the money to participate in the end-to-end test. However, we have unequivocal evidence that our change is ready. And here it is. And they would present databases full of stuff and just walk away. But Mr. S was very wise, and he would approach management and the power plays would occur. The money was found. They participated in the test, and you can fill the end of the story. And yes, the test failed. Their unequivocal evidence was not sufficient. Which is why testing's so critical to science. It needs to be rediscovered. Because testing's not the accumulation of evidence. Testing is the willingness to hand over control to an independent party who's going to really test out your work. And you're going to take responsibility for the outcome. Whereas evidence is a categorization exercise where you take incoming data and merge it into a narrative. Very, very different things. Now, I think science is in pretty good shape. I mean, I support an organisation which is trying to protect endangered fauna in Australia, and it's doing an absolutely wonderful work, and they do a lot of testing. Everything is measured, everything's public, everything's accessible, everything is reported. Programs are very much extended experiments, and conclusions are very slowly made. And it's all reviewed. Good stuff. But there are large sections of science that have taken it on board to produce streams of evidence for their disaster scenarios. Scientists really need to let go and open up for debate, handing over to independent parties to assist their work. There's no fear in that. And let people relax and get their sleep. Point 4, community trumps victory. This really follows on from the last point. Find the common cause and work it. Because you sleep better at night when you're working with people rather than against them. Let's take climate change. Just imagine if you were to get a wide variety of people together and say, let's stop burning things. You don't have to mention CO2 or anything else. Let's stop burning things. You know, that's a goal that I think will be taken up by almost everyone. It's a great idea. Why should we be burning things? It pollutes the atmosphere as doing all these other things. And you can get everyone in the room and talk about it. Yeah, but it won't be too long before someone says, oh, let's have nuclear energy. And immediately people will lie down in front of you and say, over my dead body. In business, these people are quickly dealt with. They're taken upstairs and they're told, get on or get out. The Apostle Paul knew exactly this situation when addressing Euodia and Syntyche in Philippians 4. Get on or get out. Because there's something bigger at stake than just your theories or opinions. But without community, you lose middle ground and you lose progress. Now, working in big corporates, this is a very common problem, and management spent large sums of money trying to stamp out this victory mentality. We need to work as communities. In my line of management, management could quite often take two warring teams and stick them on a ferry and send them out onto the harbour to sort out their differences. It was a fun time. I loved it. Is the intent to find a way forward or to win an argument? Or is it more important to empower people to succeed? That's another issue. Sometimes scientists act as if they don't need to act as a community. All they need is to have the truth win out. So, those scientists go to bed at night and don't sleep. They're constantly worrying about how to win the battle. Relax, guys. Point 5. Patience trumps the silver bullet. Slow should be the new fast. I'm a long distance walker, and I recently did the Great Ocean Walk. And people came up to me saying, why do you want to do that for? You can drive it in a day. Why spend 6 days? Because you get to see it all. One of the problems of new ideas that are being pushed is they don't scale. That's a problem that we often have in information technology, where we build systems on the cheap to meet low-level requirements, and business expects to just simply extend the use of them and make them faster and bigger, when they just simply hit the wall and fail. Let's take an example of lithium-ion battery-powered cars. Here's a chart from Wikipedia. Fuel-weight ratios. It's a power-weight ratio of fuels. Right at the top you'll see antimatter, Star Trek. But as you can see, petrol's fairly up near the top. And what's at the bottom? Oh, lithium-ion batteries. They're heavy. No one's talking about making them lighter. They're pretty well stuck at that weight. So isn't that a problem? Well, of course you can make cars with lithium-ion batteries in them. They're quite effective for certain purposes. But try and make one to meet the broader market, which is what Dyson tried to do most recently. And he put, I think, all up about $3 billion into the project, and it was abandoned. The car was about 2.5 tonnes in weight, and I think was going to cost $250,000 Australian. Not very successful. It has a scalability problem. We're not going to make battery-powered planes. The constant stream of media releases, of new discoveries that will save the world, they're wonderful, but very, very, very few make it. In the real world, at least. We only lose sleep when we push these new ideas as solutions and not give them time to play out in the real world. So those are my 5 points for cultural change within science. So it's time to wrap up. Just quickly, science has been the driving force for a great deal of good, and that's going to continue. It started back in the Enlightenment, through the modern and postmodern periods, and now into whatever we're going to call it, post-normal period. But we're left questions that science is struggling to answer. What's happening to the climate, fires, viruses, and who knows what else is to come. Science has confidently stepped forward, but instead of creating confidence, has really struggled. Finally reverting to fear and creating nightmares and lack of sleep for people. That's not the way forward. So what's the key to managing uncertainty in this current climate? I would say not science, rather faith. Faith in the true and living God, the one who made and created us, who has given us specific gifts so that we can understand. And of course, faith in each other. How that might work out in this newly emerging period, well, I don't know. That's a subject of a long conversation. One that I hope we all have. Thank you.